before coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page, if you could do me a quick favor, see that little black subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that black subscribe button. Really does help our audience grow, really does help our channel grow, really does help and mean more than you could possibly know. So go ahead, hit that little black subscribe button. Also, thank you to our presenting sponsor, Betfred Sportsbook and the Betfred Sportsbook app. Bet 50 on any game, get $250 in free bets. Thank you again to Betfred. Thank you again to you. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Switch gears, and I want to talk about just, frankly, the biggest story in college football and college sports, and I would argue maybe the most fascinating story going on in sports right now, and that is this ongoing crazy situation involving Colorado football, Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, and just this insane roster overhaul that we've seen over the last couple weeks. Now, by now, I think everybody kind of knows the headlines. We talked about it last week. I fundamentally have no issue with what Coach Prime is doing, but we saw it last week. 22 players, I believe was the final number, ended up entering the transfer portal in the, 48 to 72 hours after Colorado's spring game. And Coach Prime had absolutely no apologies for it. He basically said a couple things. He said, one, this is the new world of college football. Two, you got to wait to see who is coming and who is going to replace some of the guys that have entered the portal. And so it was controversial. I talked about it on the show. I have no fundamental issue with it. This is the new world of college sports. You give players the right to earn money, which they deserve, as I've said many times, through NIL. You give them the right to leave whenever they want. Well, they also have to live up to their end of the bargain too. And coming off a 1-11 season, many of those guys were not living up to expectations. Many of those guys were not playing to a Pac-12 caliber level. And frankly, Coach Prime said, I think I can go out and get players that are better than you. And so while everybody focused on the big, overwhelming number of players that entered the transfer portal, I don't think enough people are paying attention to what has happened since, as Coach Prime is slowly but surely starting to do exactly what he told you he would do in terms of restocking the roster. Colorado has picked up several marquee transfers in just the short amount of time since the spring game ended last week. We talked about some of them last week. There were 2 players that committed from Florida State, 1 from Tennessee, but we got to talk about what has happened since, because just since Saturday, we have 4 different players who have committed to Colorado. 2 of them coming from the, 3 coming from the SEC, 1 coming from Florida State. And as I said, slowly but surely, Coach Prime is starting to do what he promised he would. Let's start with the commitments from Monday, because it was a busy day in Colorado, busy day in Boulder, where Coach Prime picked up 2 pretty big-time commitments. The first one, a very intriguing name. Ironically, both these guys were high school teammates down in Florida. But let's start with Tarvarish Dawson, wide receiver out of Auburn. Now, he didn't play a ton over the last couple of years, but he is a guy that stands out to me for 2 specific reasons. 1, had offers from a lot of places coming out of high school. Florida State, South Carolina, Ole Miss, Arkansas. I mean, he could have gone a lot of different places. He's not a super big wide receiver, but had committed to Cincinnati in the portal after starting his career at Auburn, and then he flipped and ended up at Colorado today. And so I like the move because this is a guy that's an SEC caliber talent. It wasn't just Auburn where he played, but it was also had, again, offers from Ole Miss, Arkansas, South Carolina. And the other thing that stands out, he fits the profile of what Coach Prime is looking for in his skill position guys. This guy is a burner, okay? He was a track star in high school. He was a guy that had 2 catches for 30 yards, 15 yards per catch this season. And you add him to that explosive skill position core. We've talked about a lot of these guys. Travis Hunter is going to play both ways. Adam Hopkins, 4-star wide receiver. Dylan Edwards, 4-star running back coming out of high school. Couple of the other guys that are coming in. This kid, Tarvarish Dawson, very much fits the bill, very much fits what Coach Prime is trying to do, and very much is an upgrade over some of the guys that left the program. Speaking of which, Dawson's high school teammate actually also committed to Colorado on Monday. And if you follow college football pretty closely, this is a name you might know. Amarion Cooper is a defensive back that played the last couple of years at Florida State and didn't only play. This guy started at Florida State multiple games. This past season, 7 starts for or 4 starts, this past season for a 10-win football team. This guy was an impact player. 14 tackles, 1 interception, 1 forced fumble. Another guy that was highly recruited coming out of high school. Chose Florida State over Miami, chose Florida State over Texas A&M, but a guy that contributed for a really good team last year decided to re-enter, to look at his options, enters the portal, and now he's headed to Colorado. Those 2 are coming on top of 2 other SEC players that committed over the weekend. The first one, a cornerback, Jaquez Robinson, played at Alabama these past couple of years, was a former 4-star guy there for multiple years, got a little bit lost on the depth chart, but he played, contributed on special teams, contributed in the defensive backfield. He announced this weekend that he is coming to Colorado. And then, oh, by the way, an offensive tackle named David Connor, who committed from Florida. Big, 6'6", physical run, run blocker. I'm tripping over my own words here, but a big physical offensive lineman, the type of guys that Coach Prime needs. And so I bring it up because Coach Prime is delivering on what he said. As I said, a wide receiver who started his career at Auburn, a defensive back who started multiple games at Florida State over the last couple years for a good 10-win team, a program on the rise. Jaquez Robinson would have been in the rotation at Alabama this upcoming season. He announces his transfer. And then, oh, by the way, an offensive tackle coming off a true freshman year where he can be a building block going forward. I should mention, by the way, this is on top of the fact that, as I discussed on a previous show, this is on top of the 3 guys that they got last week who committed to Colorado shortly after the spring game. There were 2 players from Florida State. The first one, Derek McClendon II, a defensive end, played all 13 games this past season, started 12, 37 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks, 3 QB hurries. He commits. On top of that, Brendan Gant, a linebacker, commits. And as I said, I'm tripping over my own words here, but I apologize here, but the big defensive tackle out of Tennessee, Amari McNeil, commits as well. So just in the last couple days, we're not talking about, and keep in mind, the portal, technically you had to enter by Sunday night, the end of April 30th, but you can keep recruiting these kids. So the fact that I'm getting too excited here. But let's start with the 2 things that stand out to mind here. So like I said, 7 impact players just since the portal closed the last couple of days. But why I bring it up, there's still plenty more time, but this is what stands out to me about those 7 guys. Listen, you can like what Coach Prime did or not like what Coach Prime did. I've said many times, I have no real issue with it. But at the end of the day, what stands out to me is this. He made a promise when all those guys entered the portal last couple weeks, 22 plus, 30 plus since April 15th. I think it's like 45, 46 since he got there in December. The one thing that he promised was that all of the guys that are coming in are essentially going to be better than the guys that are leaving. In other words, we're coming off a 1-11 season. It was a disaster. The players in this program, like I hate to be mean, but it's 2023. This is major college football. NIL is a factor. You can transfer. And what Coach Prime basically said it without saying it is the guys that we had aren't good enough. And so I don't feel bad for the guys that were out. And you can criticize Coach Prime for whatever, but he is living up to his word. He is a man of his word because the guys that he has coming in are better than the guys that were sent out. Go ahead over the next couple weeks and see all the guys that end up leaving Colorado and where they end up. Now, some Montana Lemonius Craig, the kid who was the star of the spring game, yeah, he's going to go somewhere good. He's got offers from Auburn and a bunch of other places. But watch where the back end of those depth chart guys go. They're not going up a level. They're not going to Alabama and Georgia and Florida and Tennessee. They're probably going to go down a level. They're going to go to the group of 5. They're going to go to the FCS. And the bottom line is, if you just look at the profiles of the players that are gone and you look at the profile of the players who are coming in, it's not even debatable. By the way, I don't have all the stats in front of me, but if you go back to the winter time, when Coach Prime signed his initial high school recruiting class, they had, I believe it was Cormani McClain was one, but I believe they had 4 total 4-star or 5-star prospects in this class. And I believe the stat was they had 3 total 4-stars in the previous 3 classes prior to Coach Prime arriving. And it might have even been longer. So I bring it up because what did I just tell you? Tarvaris Dawson, Amarion Miller, Jaquez Robinson, David Connor. Those are 4 4-star guys that have committed just since Saturday, not including the guys from last week, not including the guys that entered. Coach Prime is doing what he said he was going to do. And you might not like it, and it might be different. It might be quirky, and it might not be what your grandfather's version of college football is. But he promised when you see the guys that are coming in, you're going to understand why we're making the moves that we are. And I gotta give him credit. He put his money where his mouth is, and he is bringing in guys that are a step up. Now, look, what does it all mean? Well, look, obviously not all of them are going to hit, okay? That's just the way it is. Not every single one of them is going to hit. Not every single one of them is going to work, as I've said many times. I'm not saying they're going to be ready to step on the field to compete with Alabama tomorrow. But the talent upgrade, you could argue it's as much of a talent upgrade as anywhere in college football. 1-11, bunch of 2- and 3-star guys. At the very least, you're bringing in 4-star guys, super high-profile guys. And now we get to roll the ball out and see what happens. Roll the ball out, by the way, sounds negative. But the point I'm trying to make is you get to line up and see what happens. And you give Coach Prime these dudes. You give the Coach Prime these athletes. I like them a lot better against Nebraska, against TCU. Probably, USC is really good. Oregon's really good. I'm not saying they're going to beat everybody. But what I am saying is he said he was going to bring in better players, and he did. So I'll be fascinated to see how all these guys perform. But then, as importantly, I'm also fascinated to see what's coming next. Because as I started to say before I cut myself off because I was getting too excited, the portal is closed now, officially. After April 30th, the deadline has passed. But there's still a lot of difference makers in that portal right now. And Colorado still has probably about, 20 or so roster spots to fill. And as you could probably guess, they aren't anywhere close to being done. And so I expect some more big names. I'm intrigued to see what they do. And I don't think they're anywhere close to done yet. But I think Colorado is going to have a very interesting group going forward. And again, credit Coach Prime. He did exactly what he said he would, which is bring in difference makers, bring in better. The guys that are coming in are better than the guys that are leaving. And I can't wait to see it all on the field in September. If you enjoyed this video, do me a quick favor. Make sure to subscribe to the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. I think it's a black subscribe button in the bottom. And also make sure to download new episodes of the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast everywhere you get your podcasts.